wonder if it's time to panic in Cincinnati. We're getting multiple reports out of the NFL Network that a deal is not imminent between Trey Hendrickson and the organization. And to that point, that the Bengals would actually entertain trade talks for their leading pass rusher, Big 91 there on the defensive side. Jensen Lewis, is this news or a whole lot of noise?
I mean, it continues to be news, and I think that's the problem, right, is that you wanted – once he was the hold-in, and we talked to Dan Horde, radio voice of the Cincinnati Bengals last week, and the understanding is that, okay, yeah, there was still a fair amount of space in between, but perhaps a deadline deal right up until the first snap there for the Browns and the Bengals in Week 1. This is significant from a standpoint that when you have the national guys that are pretty plugged in and would table, all right, this is still kind of lingering here, but he's probably going to be part of the Bengals when it's all said and done. I'm not getting that vibe, and I don't know where the posturing helps either side here, if indeed that is what it is, Dave. Right now, Bengals 22-1 on FanDuel to win the Super Bowl, and I know you already have shares of the Bengals locked in for this upcoming year in the futures market. Let's play it out here. If somehow, some way, Trey Hendrickson is dealt before Week 1, what does that number drift to? Because that completely changes the dynamic of the Bengals front seven, let alone what that defensive unit looks like as a whole. And secondly, and I'll take it from the pro athlete standpoint, is this would be seismic in that locker room. I mean, seismic. Okay, I don't know where you recover defensively from that, because you don't replace him with what he means to that overall team, let alone their defensive unit.
As you well know, when I made that wager, it was 20-1. It's actually drifted to 22-1 on me, so I didn't get the best of the number there. And my thought, I told you about it back in February when I made those wagers, it was at the big three that was unsigned at the time, looking for new deals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson. I just thought it was a matter of time that they get those done. You get the wide receivers done. I thought that was going to be the hard part. It wasn't. Those were done relatively early, right? It's Big Trey. And you mentioned that conversation we had wherever you get your podcast, go back and listen to it with Dan Horde. And he made mention that with the hold-in scenario, that Trey would not be a distraction. When I hear a report like that, Jensen Lewis, I find it impossible not to be a distraction. That you are there and you're not getting closer. So I think that's even more of a distraction, if you will, that I see you as my potential teammate every day and you're not out there with us. And I'm not saying that there's blame and that the players won't look at the front. They're always going to look to the front office and go, pay the man his money, because everybody wants to get paid as athletes. You know that better than most. But I do think at some point, some guy's going to go, hey, man, are you with us now or not? Like, you still are under contract. Like, are you really going to hold out and not get paid? And at some point, we want to know if you're going to be with us or against us. So this has got to get to a boiling point, and maybe we're getting there. But when I hear this news, it is impossible not to be a distraction, even if you physically are not. You're not out there barking, but the news gets out. People are going to start going, man, what's going on here? We thought this was posturing for a new deal. Now what are you doing? We need you. Week 1 is coming up sooner rather than later.
There are plenty of teams around the NFL, including the Colts, the Panthers, the Browns, who are among the teams that have reportedly reached out to the Bengals. There are plenty of teams that would love to bring in Trey Hendrickson, but the problem is you're giving up, in theory, significant capital, and then you are giving him his next deal. You are inheriting the problem that the Cincinnati Bengals have right now, which is not being able to come to terms with Hendrickson. And look, I get it from both sides, right? I mean, Hendrickson is an older player. You're hesitant if you're the Bengals to commit to someone like that long term. You've handed out a ton of money over these last few off seasons, mostly on the offensive side of the ball. But like you said, Jeff, I know you're a Bengals fan. You've been very measured about this, but it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because we know how great this offense is in Cincinnati. We know how bad the defense is. And you take Trey Hendrickson away from it, it's going to be even worse. It might be one of the 5 worst units in the NFL. And, the Bengals did something they don't often do. They went to extreme lengths financially to keep this offensive core together. You hit on Chase Brown. All of a sudden you have this great running back to pair with the receivers, to pair with Joe Burrow. And it just feels like it might not matter, at least in the short term, because this defense, like it did last season, might be so bad that it prevents the Bengals from really competing.
Yeah, and it's not necessary. It's not forced as an error. They also, they have some clear things they could improve. They can improve their right guard situation. They can improve their defense. They have the room salary cap wise to do it. It's an unforced error. It's just so Bengals. It's like the Cowboys, same thing. We make the Bengals Cowboys comparison has been made a billion times, by the way. It's not like I'm going out on a limb and saying this. There's a lot of people have made that comparison. I even saw, like, as soon as that Hendrickson note came out, like 6 different people said, hey, they should trade Hendrickson for Parsons, as if either team is going to get the deal done with a new player. Come on, let's be realistic here. They'd screw that up too. But yeah, it would be great to see Micah Parsons on the Bengals. Sure, I'd love it. He's younger than Trey. Sure, never going to happen. They're never going to do that. But it's fun to dream on that, but it's just not going to happen. Meanwhile, the Commanders, no Terry McLaurin still. That's at an impasse as well. And now we see a report, too, that Brian Robinson Jr. might be on the trade block. Our friend Ben Standig, formerly with The Athletic, now doing his own podcast, he talks about how Brian Robinson might even be a cut candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I think if organizationally you're at the point where you're basically leaking publicly that you're trying to trade a player, the implication is that it's going to be really tough to keep him on the roster. So I think there certainly is a world in which, if they can't find a deal for Brian Robinson, they cut him. And he'll end up somewhere, right? Brian Robinson is a productive player, but if you dig in on some of the details here, it sounds like Washington had started to sour on him toward the end of last season. Didn't feel great about how he played down the stretch into the playoffs. I think they want somebody who's a little bit more dynamic to pair with Jaden Daniels. And I think the big question is here, if we remove Brian Robinson from the equation, and this is an especially big question in the fantasy streets, Jeff, who's the guy who steps up? How much of Austin Eckler do we see? Do we get any Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez? I mean, the guy to keep an eye on in fantasy football, the guy who is flying up draft boards right now, you can still get him, often in that pick 100 to pick 130 range. We're not talking about a completely outrageous price, but Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, 7th rounder out of Arizona. This is the guy that everybody is kind of waiting with bated breath. If and when they move on from Brian Robinson, could he be the one who ascends that depth chart? I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. I'm interested in him. I think he's the most fascinating of those 3 remaining options. Certainly we know who Austin Eckler is at this point in his career. McNichols, Rodriguez, they're fine. They're not guys who jump off the screen in the way that Croskey-Merritt does. But he's the guy. If you're preparing for your fantasy drafts right now, again, use that code VSiN over at rotowire.com, 15% off any of our fantasy tools. He's the guy to keep an eye on in that backfield. I don't know if it happens right away, Jeff, but I think part of the impetus here with Brian Robinson potentially being on the way out is to maybe create more opportunity for Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt.
Yep. And I was just doing a quick look at Brian Robinson over-unders, by the way, too. And only Caesar still has one posted as of per our tool that looks at it. And that might not even be current if you try to run over to Caesar and place it. Maybe you can. But it's 700.5 for Brian Robinson on the rushing yards. Yeah, I'd take the under on that. I'd take the under anyhow. I think it's natural to try to take some running back unders. I think that's a good thing to try to look at there. But, maybe you try to look to see if you can find some Austin Eckler instead. And I'm having a hard time finding a whole lot of that. Croskey-Merritt, as you mentioned there, I'd love to take him in fantasy, and I agree with you. It's not going to be a 3-down situation. It's not going to be a situation there where he's going to fully take over. But, yeah, I'm interested. Color me interested in Croskey-Merritt for sure. I have a couple shares of them already. That price is going to go up now. You're paying around pick 120 in drafts to go ahead and get, we'll just call him Bill, like he likes to be called. Bill, let's go get Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill. Go ahead and get him as a late flyer in your drafts.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now, absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at 0 cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.